Hi guys, it's Blackie for Shaman's Forge Bushcraft. Come out to the river today to talk about the next phase in our discussion on keeping warm. Now usually when you're selecting a campsite, that's the 3 W's, which is wood, water, and widowmakers. In the wintertime there's a 4th W, and that is wood, water, widowmakers, and windbreak. You need something that naturally shields you from the wind. Now, let's do a real brief discussion on what is cold and where this cold comes from. At the polar regions, you have a large column of extremely cold air. This air is held there by winds that circumnavigate around the top of the planet, and as the cold wants to settle down, these winds kind of turn it back in. So imagine like an upside down top on top of the world sitting there spinning. At point X, due to climate conditions, that cold air kind of sloughs, and like an avalanche it goes running down. It comes through Canada into the United States, into Mexico, and I'm on the Gulf Coast. It reaches all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. This cold air is very heavy and dense. That's the reason when you open up the refrigerator at night to get that midnight snack, your toes get cold. Cold air, being dense, literally falls out of the refrigerator, and it wants to stay in the low areas and follow the low areas. Consequently, when it comes up to a natural obstacle like a mountain range that is running east to west, it hits it, and rather than filling up like water, it wants to run around it. So you can have areas where you're sheltered or shielded from this cold air flowing by. Leeward side you'll hear a lot of times, or something like that, but in a nutshell, it's a pocket of relatively stable air. Now, these pockets form on the backside of mountain ranges, hills, dense tree cover, and etc. Something that is a natural windbreak, so that cold air, rather than going through it, flows around it. If you're in that sheltered pocket, you have less moving air, and thus less heat being lost due to the cold air convection. Helicopter, hang on, be right back. Now, sorry guys, but right now there's a lot of training cycle going on at the base over here, and so anywhere in the woods down here in the south, you're going to have a lot of helicopters. So, now, when you've got the windbreak in front of you, which is a hill, a mountain, a large rock, a high water line on a bank, something like that, that is causing the wind to flow around, and you've got that pocket of relatively still air, you have a greater chance of staying warm there because my fire does not have to fight the wind. So when I set up my shelter should be in that, if possible, natural windbreak, and then it should also face so that the back of the shelter is to the predominant wind. Here in my part of the country, the predominant cold wind is north and northwest, super rare northeast. So I tend to point my shelter toward the southeast to catch the sun in the morning, and any cold air that does get past that windbreak hits the back of my shelter and thus is blocked from me. I've had personal experience of building a camp and it looked good and didn't have hardly any wind, and then the weather changed, and then in comes this 20-30 mile an hour cold wind, and you build this great big fire directly in front of your shelter. But the problem is the wind's going that way and all the heat is being blown away from your shelter. Well, now you have to expel more and more resources to generate radiant heat when your heat is being blown away like blowing a candle downwind. If I had picked a site better, where I had that extra W, the windbreak, and I had set up my shelter as the last line of windbreak, it would have been a much warmer camp. So, when you're looking for your winter shelter, looking for location, location, location is everything. You're going to stop. You're looking for resources. Now, in the summertime, we think of, I want to be next to the water, like the river right here. I only want to have to go a couple of steps to get my water. That's a bad idea in the winter, because flowing water By the fact it is flowing, it means that the surface temperature is above 32 degrees. What happens is, say the ambient air temperature out here has dropped down to 20s or teens, and that water's still flowing. It acts as a refrigeration cycle. Anybody that's canoed in the winter or boated or duck hunters will tell you the closer you get to the water, the colder it gets. 1, humidity. 2, as that warm air is rising from the water, because it is warmer, it sucks cool air in, and this convection current sets up, and from the water's edge out 50 yards, 100 yards, it depends on the level of the land, you can get just 10 or 15 degrees colder than the ambient air temperature up on a hill up here. So I have seen it where, just for an example, it would be probably 38 up on top of the hill, and it would be 25 at the water's edge because of that kind of severe change. It can do it if you got a little wind blowing down the water and etc. So you want to be away from the water source. You want to be uphill from it. You want to be above the high water line. You want to be in a sheltered area that's close enough to water that I can go fill up, of course. Yet it's far enough away I don't get that cold pocket. I do not want to be in a bottom either. I want to be up in elevation above the mean bottom, because remember, cold air sinks into the bottoms. So if you have a hill like this, and down here is the river, somewhere up in here is where I'm going to get. Up here at the top, probably too much wind, or it's too far to walk. Too far down, and I'm getting into that cold pocket. So it's a trial and error, but do not set up your camp in low-lying areas in the winter, because it will naturally be colder than a higher area. So pick a windbreak above high water mark level, something that's sheltered, where I can face my shelter to the southeast or the south to catch the morning sun and have my back to the ambient wind. That, because we have fought so hard to this point to create a microclimate with our bodies generating the heat, our bedding holding it, we don't want to lose it now to a breeze blowing through, which very quickly can chill you because it's very quickly cooling. So we want to be as sheltered and as still air as possible. I hope this gives you some ideas, guys. Next, we're going to start talking about the actual shelter itself and fire. That'll be our next installment. I'm Blackie for Shaman's Forge Bushcraft, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.